Welcome, everyone. It's a very special episode of The Buck Stops Here, the official program of NotInHallOfFame.com. And of course, I'm Kirk Buchner, aka The Buck, who runs this joint, NotInHallOfFame.com, where we look at those who are not in the Baseball Hall of Fame, Football Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame, Hockey Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Fame, and all things sports and kind of music related, because I'm just a nerd that way. I'm here with one of my regular co-hosts on the Elevator Show, Chris Mouradian.
Morning.
And Chris, you've set this up again, and I am so excited. I'm kind of fanboying out a little bit because, as a Hall of Fame enthusiast, what better conversation can I have than with a Hall of Fame voter, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the week after everything just went down? Clark Judge, thank you so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure. Wait, you're talking about Music Hall of Fame? Why is Jethro Tull not in there? Why is Joe Cocker not in there? Come on.
I've been a big proponent of Jethro Tull for a long time. They've never even been nominated.
Yeah, but we put Janet Jackson, Dolly Parton in there. That whole thing's a joke. I mean, I for years, I'm a Todd Rundgren fan. The fact that he had to wait for long is ridiculous. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, and they backdoored him in too.
Yeah, they did. And I'll let you know, I'm going to see him, got the ticket somewhere here, in April, my 90th time to see him.
Well, so I guess you saw the light.
Yeah, I saw the light in 1973. That's when I saw the light.
Nice. Nice. Oh, okay. Again, before we went on, I said, like, I learned that you're kind of honorary Canadian here, and now you're a rock nerd like me. I mean, like, we're bonding so well here.
Yeah. I love hockey. I love the Montreal Canadiens. I don't like where they are right now, but they've got some young kids. But it's taken so long for them to come back from that Stanley Cup final when they're up against Tampa. But got to get a goalie. I think they may have something, but Montembeault is pretty good. This new kid that's come up, not bad. But it's not like, when they had Patrick Waugh and then, years later, they've had a couple of things, but as a couple of guys going, Carey Price, I thought was, you just got used to Carey Price being there. It's tough to watch a game when teams are scoring 8 and 9 goals. There was a game against Pittsburgh earlier this year where they scored 9, and like 6 of them were in like a space of like 5 or 6 minutes. So when that's tough to watch. So I hope a Canadian team wins the Stanley Cup, because I'm tired of seeing warm weather teams, Florida teams get in there. I just would like to see LA and those teams. I'd like to see someone other than those teams win, or original 6 team. I mean, I go back to the original 6. Still think Bobby Orr is the greatest player I've ever seen. And then there's everybody else. So.
Well, I totally agree with you. I think Bobby Orr is the greatest hockey player, period, of all time.
Yeah, to me, it's like the music. You got the Beatles and everyone else. In hockey, got Bobby Orr and everyone else. So
I love where this went early. I was going to pick your brain on the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but
no, forget it. No, we can just talk about music and hockey.
There we go. Okay, that's what we're going to have you on the next time. But before we sort of begin, thank you for putting out my favorite article every year. I put that out on X, and I meant that. It's you lift the curtain for Hall of Fame people like Chris and myself and Jack Silverstein, our good friend, who we're going to sort of mention early, a little bit later, because he kind of called this out, which you sort of gave him a shout out on your article, and one of your recent articles. And we just sort of love learning as much as we can about the process. We just talked about hockey. We know nothing about the process other than 18 people gather. Basketball, we don't even know who it is. Baseball, we know what it is, but some writers will tell us and some won't. And
yeah.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I actually interviewed a couple of the voters who could not tell me, because they don't know how many other voters there are.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I always would vote when Todd Rundgren was a candidate, and then I quit when he finished 3rd, I think, in that voting. And they promoted several people, including Janet Jackson, I think, ahead of him.
It was a fan vote, so it wasn't.
Yeah, it's a fan vote. But then he said, "Why are we even having the fan vote? I finished 3rd. Why are we even having it?" See, he said, "That's a slap in the face to my fans." So I'm out of it. And I thought he's right. I'm just forget it. I'm out of it too. I didn't care anymore. Then he got elected, and he toured and true to himself. He said, "I'm not showing up," which I thought was right. Didn't show up, and they had a video with I think. Patty Smith introduced him, but just did a video, and I thought it's the way to do it.
It's the same reason, though, that the Pro Football Hall of Fame has a fan vote. Guys, you can collect emails.
Yeah, right.
But
right.
That's neither here nor there. But again, thank you for peeling back the curtain as much as you're allowed to. And it means a lot to so many of us. So thanks for that. Chris, I
Sure.
do want to sort of open up with the first question here.
Yeah, sure. So as we know, last week there was a new class that was announced, for very deserving members. Sterling Sharp, our senior committee member this year, and then three modern eras with Antonio Gates, Jared Allen, and Eric Allen. So I just
Right.
wanted to kind of kick off the show here and kind of get your thoughts on the class that was just selected, and um, how you feel about the small but what I think is a very deserving class.
Yeah, I think it's small but very deserving. I agree with you. It's the smallest class since 2005, and we only had two modern era candidates then, Steve Young and Dan Marino. Pretty good class, with two. But I was surprised, as were other voters, and no sooner had it been announced than I got a flurry of texts from other voters, so shocked that we only had four, when in the past we've had eight, seven, something like that, seven or eight. When we cut from seven to five, I think the understanding was we're going to end up with five, right? That's the understanding. I guess I should have listened to Jack Silverstein and some others as well. I had other people tell me, you're going to end up with four. I went, no, we're not. We're going to end up with like four or five modern era. And we ended up with four total. And I was surprised. And as one of the presenters, dismayed, to be honest with you, I presented Ralph Hay. And I don't understand how any Hall of Fame cannot have its founder in the Hall of Fame. I don't get it. I mean, it's just like, what? I mean, and I understand he was overlooked. I understand he died 81 years ago. And then there are people who want to say, well, he did was hold a meeting. And no, he didn't. But if that's what you want to say, he held the most important meeting in the history of the NFL. He ended up creating it. We're not going to be talking about any of these people. And someone said, not in this meeting, but it said in the past, well, someone would have done it. And I said, yeah, someone would have. And someone did. His name was Ralph Hay. So it's disturbing and disappointing to me. I don't want to dwell on it because I'm angry. I'm really angry about that. But they know that, and I know other voters do it. I'm passionate about it. Anyone who presented him, I think, would have been passionate about it. There are all sorts of signs in downtown Canton that acknowledge him as the founder, and yet they hang something on the wall on the second floor. It says the Ralph Hay Pioneer Award. This is great, next to the Bill Nunn Award and the Pete Rozelle Award, except for one thing: Bill Nunn and Pete Rozelle in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Right.
Ralph Hay's not. And as I said, I don't get it. And I'm going to leave it at that, because otherwise you're going to have to pack me in ice here. So I think that the thing that actually shocked me was Mike Holmgren. I couldn't believe Mike Holmgren wasn't in, because there is a recency bias among this group, whether you'll acknowledge it or not. And Mike Holmgren's a recent coach. Everyone knows him basically in there. If you didn't cover him, and I covered him, you know who he is. I'd say most people there probably don't know who Ralph Hay is. In fact, that was acknowledged by one of the voters who leaked a story to ESPN in November, upset that Robert Kraft wasn't the contributor finalist, and said, this is disappointing. Nobody knows who this guy is except for historians. At which point I did point out, well, two things. One is we're supposed to elect the most qualified, not the most popular guy. And secondly, nobody knows him except historians. We're supposed to be historians. What are you missing? And so, as I said, I'll just stop there because I repeated that to the group. But yeah, I just don't get the Holmgren thing. I thought was a slam dunk. I knew Sterling Sharp was a slam dunk. I really felt that way. I didn't need anyone to tell me. I knew that, and I felt Mike was too. I was really surprised with that. Now, that said, the two senior candidates were really good candidates. Jim Tyrer, you look at his record, probably had the best record of anyone outside of Adam Vinatieri in that entire field, modern and senior. And then Maxie Baughn. I saw Maxie Baughn play. I'm old enough to have seen him play. He's a great player. 9 Pro Bowls in 10 years, when Pro Bowls actually meant something. And I thought he might get some traction. The fact that he hasn't been pushed before, I think this was his 46th or 47th year, as a available candidate, and his first time as a finalist. I thought he might get some traction. He apparently didn't. Neither did Ralph A. and neither Jim Tyrer. Tyrer, I knew would be tough. I knew Tyrer would be tough because of the situation, the circumstances involving his passing. I don't need to go into that. You guys know certainly about that, and that was not allowed to be discussed. The bottom line is the 4 people in there, I have no problem with them. I mean, I voted for all four of them. But I'm just wondering where we're going now in the future, and I'm sure we're going to have this set up for at least another year. They can't keep blowing up the process every year and changing it. That would be an acknowledgement that we really don't know what we're doing, and I think they're trying very hard to get it straight. But it seems to me it was like I thought this was the Deion Sanders class, right? He wanted a smaller class, and he wanted Eric Allen in. He didn't have to have Eric Allen pushing him. Eric Allen didn't need anyone pushing him. But he got the smaller class he wanted. I did think he was right about something. I think we need to raise the bar some. I think some guys have gotten in recent years, and I'm not going to be specific, who I thought were a little bit questionable, maybe shouldn't have made it, but now it makes it really tough to get in. And so when you look down the list of what's coming up next, and let's say you buy into there are going to be 3 modern era guys. So how many openings are there actually going to be? Next year, we got Drew Brees and Larry Fitzgerald come in. I would guess they're both going to be first ballot guys. Brees, no question. Fitzgerald, he jumps the pool of wide receivers.
Right.
Whether he gets in or not, I don't know. But I would say chances are pretty good. Okay, that means one guy from the 4 who are left out this year, one. Well, who's that going to be? Kuechly, Vinatieri. I mean, of those 4, Vinatieri's got the best qualifications just because he was one of 2 players at his position on the 100th anniversary team. No one else can say that. But he's a specialist, and we're kind of slow to move on them. So I'm going to say that's an understatement. We're slow to move on them. Devin Hester, 3 years. It took Morton Anderson, who was then the leading scorer, all-time leading scorer, 4 years as a finalist, 5 years eligibility. So, okay, what do we have after that? 2027. Ben Roethlisberger. Okay, there's another first ballot. Adrian Peterson. Okay, there's another one. Rob Gronkowski. Oh, he's going to sit, probably, I would guess. He's going to sit, but could he be a first ballot? He could be. Then you go, okay, there are no openings.
Anniversary.
Yeah, right,
Oh.
right. So you go, okay, so who's going to sit of those 3? I don't know. Okay, then the next year, who do we have? Tom Brady and J.J. Watt.
Yeah.
I've
Okay,
heard of
so
them. I heard they're good.
yeah, and so now you get the message. Yeah, and so it's pretty clear what the message is now. If you don't change the requirements, you're going to have a huge backlog that you can't possibly clear out. There's no movement now. There's no movement. And I think some of those people who are in line, I think probably should drop out. But I'm a big supporter of Hines Ward. I'm a big Hines Ward guy. And you want to tell me what the message is to him? Here's the message. You may have 20 straight years as a semifinalist. That's the message, because we can't get you out. Nobody ahead of you is moving. And the message now to Reggie Wayne or Steve Smith, adios, because we're not going to have 4 wide receivers next year. Torry Holt's already, but he's budgeted to be in there as one of the top 7. He has to be. He's included, all right? So he's in there. So he's mandated. He's in. Larry Fitzgerald, okay. One of those guys, Wayne or Smith, because there aren't going to be 4 wide receivers, not in one class. We've had 3, not 4. You can't do that. And so who drops out? Do both of them drop out? Who moves forward? I mean, you start going down the list, and you're gonna start, reducing that. Plus, I didn't even mention next year. What would I say? Drew Brees and Larry Fitzgerald.
Right.
What do you do with Frank Gore? He's the 3rd all-time leading rusher. So it's a gridlock of suitable candidates. I like the fact that it's smaller. I do think we need to be a little more discriminatory about discriminating about who goes in. It makes it tough, but you can't make it virtually impossible and improbable. And only first ballot guys are getting in. And I think we need to now. I think it's incumbent upon us to basically clarify what is a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I've always subscribed to the idea that first ballot Hall of Famer should be someone whose name you mention when you stand up and you sit down. Tom Brady, adios. J.J. Watt, Drew Brees, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Jim Brown, John Unitas, Jerry Rice, I mentioned it, Joe Montana. Brett Favre. You don't need, when Brett Favre was introduced, sat down. Joe Montana, Ari Miller introduced him, sat down. That's the way it should be. Peyton Manning, Don't need to talk about Peyton Manning. You know, if and when Jackson's up and Patrick Mahomes, just say their name and sit down. Look, don't waste our time. There's no reason discussing that. First ballot. But when you stand up and say, I don't know, I don't know who I'm not going to say anyone's name, but someone who you have to go, okay, well, let's just talk about that. Well, probably not at first, especially now that it's so limited. So it's a long way of saying I'm really conflicted about what's just happened. I know Tony Dungy was shocked, sort of like, what? I didn't see that coming. Well, I guess we should have. And I guess if that's the future, it's going to be really tough for some people to advance who I think are qualified. And that, unfortunately, is only going to enlarge a very deep seniors pool that people can't get out of.
Mm-hmm. One thing, though, because Chris sort of knew why I was smiling at one point earlier. I've been on record. Hines Ward's going to go 20 for 20 in semis.
Probably will. He probably will. I mean, not once. They're going to change. They've got to change it. They've got this. There's enough pushback that they have. I think they've got to change it. In the short term, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think they understand.
In 2 years?
Sorry?
Maybe in 2 years? Because are they
possibly
the next 2 years internally?
Yeah, I mean, we changed the coach contributor and all these voting processes in 2 years. I mean, there was a 2 year window there because they had, remember, 2 years of 3 senior finalists. Okay, good. I think that needed to happen. Now that idea when you have 3 senior finalists, 1 coach, and 1 contributor, and we picked the top 3, I went, okay. I mean, I can see that until someone pointed out to me, wait, so no, it's not the top 3. It's a maximum of the top 3, a minimum of 1. You have to get 80% of the vote. That ain't going to work because what you have are people splitting votes across the board. The same thing when you go 7 modern era candidates and you've got 5 who are chosen. They split the votes. And if you don't believe it, being there when you're talking about 3 wide receivers, they've split the vote for years. Wayne, Johnson, and Holt have split the vote for years until we finally move Andre Johnson forward. Mm-hmm. But that's what happens. And so that's why when I will say, I'll be honest with you, when I looked at that, I went, there's no contributor candidate's got a chance, I guess, unless it's Robert Kraft and his people have been pushing him for years and pushing him. Well, let's just get him out there. Let him get out there so he can be denied too. And you see what it's like. You see what it's like because it's so tough to go as a contributor head to head with a coach, just a coach. Because what happened? We put them in the same group together, right? Coach, contributor, candidate. 2 years. Coach was always picked. Don Coryell, Buddy Parker. What do you think happens when they're included with players and coaches? They don't have a chance because you look at what happened the 23 years prior to 2014 when they created your own separate contributor candidate. 2015 was the class, but they created in 2014. Those 23 years before, you had 1 non-player, non-coach, non-owner who was elected. That was Ed Sable, NFL Films. That was it. So you can't even get the founder of the league in from there. What do you think the chances of Eddie Codell getting in? I mean, what do you think the chances of John Wooten, Art Rooney Jr.? What do you think their chances are? Seymour Sayoff. What do you think those chances are? People go, who? What? You kidding me? We couldn't even get Mike Holmgren in. So that's, I just think, you know what? I would disband the contributor category. I'd move the owners in with the coaches. There were only 14 preliminary coaches this year. They had to cut. The first cut was to 12. The second cut was to 9. It just tells you there are not enough candidates, right? Move the owners in there with them. Our preliminary list, I think, was close to 50 contributors. And the senior preliminary list, well over 100. It might have been like 150. I don't know what it was. But coaches at 14, you better pad that or you just better get rid of it. I just think there's got to be a bigger, broader vision here. I think Jim Porter, the president, is doing everything he can to try to get this right. And he got a lot of push from Hall of Famers to make it tougher. You need to raise the bar. And I mentioned Dion only because he was the most vocal. Right. But they did that. But now I think they've got built-in problems that they've never envisioned. And I just wish that they had consulted the Board of Selectors first just to hear what we had to say. We had to read about it, and some of us, including me, didn't look at the fine print. And I didn't know until late that that 80% rule. I went, whoa! I mean, this is a problem, and I think they know it now.
I got a question for you if I could. One of the things
I
that
don't think you have enough time in the show for me to answer because I'm going very long.
no, no, it's good, but no, because again, Chris and I, as we were recording a show last night, then we were speaking after, and we were talking to each other. It's like I don't remember if this was discussed, and if it was on a press release, I missed it, or maybe it never happened. So with Torry Holt, Vinatieri, with the people who were in the final seven, automatically going to the finalists.
I missed it too.
Okay, so that's what we were wondering.
I mean, it was mentioned during that call, and I went, "What? I didn't see that." But no, that I missed it too.
Okay.
Yeah, the first time I was aware of it was after the class was announced, and they mentioned that those four had automatically been advanced to the finalists for 2026.
Yeah, they grandfathered in. So if you look at it, and if you just believe in the math that I just gave you, all right, in terms of who's coming up, I'm telling you from my vantage point, and just kind of looking at that field, at the maximum of people from that group would be 4 over the next 4 years. So you take Kuechly 1 year, Vinatieri another one, Holt another one. So you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you do it that way. So there's no movement from behind. There's nothing going on, and so now you've got a stalemate. And in the meantime, you've got people who are qualified who are coming in into incoming classes. And I'm not talking about the first ballot guys. I'm talking about like a Marquise Pouncey, for instance. So I don't think he'd be first ballot, but he's certainly qualified. We just are sort of waiting and waiting. And what about those? I mean, we've got a logjam of offensive linemen now. What do you do with them? They're qualified. Marchionda, Willie Anderson is the best right tackle of his era, and then Jari Evans. What are you doing with these guys? And that's something they're going to have to address, because there's just a stalemate here that needs to be corrected, modified.
Yeah, it seems like they didn't look ahead to who was coming onto the ballot over the next few years. I mean, this is really kind of I don't know if it's necessarily out of the ordinary, but some of these names are really kind of top of the list candidates that are coming on that, as you mentioned, the presenter should just stand up, say, JJ Watt, sit down and move on, because that's all that needs to be said there. Everybody knows his credentials. Everybody on that panel should have watched him play his entire career. So
right, that's right.
Yeah, it seems like
same thing with Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson. I mean,
yeah.
Okay. And Tom Brady. I mean, you just go down that list. And I'm Ben Roethlisberger. I'm a big Roethlisberger fan. And I've had some people say, well, you think he's a first ballot guy? I went, yeah, why not? The 3 Super Bowls, won 2. Look at won twice as many games as he lost. I mean, what are we missing here? So I think it does. They certainly have upped the bar. I think that's good. I think upping the bar is good. I think they put it way too high. I'll be honest with you.
Do you think the bar needed to be upped for the modern era, or more the senior coach contributor side?
No. Modern era.
Okay.
No question. Modern era. The seniors, there's so many guys there who are qualified who aren't getting in. And unfortunately, as I said, I mentioned recency bias, and there'll be people on that board who will recoil at that and say, well, the only reason you're saying that is because you're a dinosaur. That's probably true. But you look at the Hall of Famers, the seniors who've been elected since the Centennial class, right? So you came out with Drew Pearson was the first year, and then you had Cliff Branch the second. Then we went to 3 and 3, and so of that group, I think there are 11 who were elected, and there are 8 there were 11 who were proposed as finalists, and there were 8 who were elected. Well, the 3 who weren't, Art Powell, Jim Tyrer, Maxie Baughn. What do they have in common? They all played prior to 1970, and so so I said to someone, if you don't play if you don't play after 1970, or you started most of your career before 1970, you need not apply. And he said 1970, about 1980. He goes, they don't want, we can't get anyone. I mean, and you're going to say, yeah, there are exceptions. Yeah, sure, because Branch played then and Pearson, but there's a recency bias that's disturbing. I mean, Eddie Metter was an all-decade safety in the 50s. Can't get a sniff. Look at Del Schaffner. First team All-Pro, 5 times in the 50s. Great receiver. I bet too many people don't know who he is. And my point is, okay, I understand if you don't know who he is. All right, I understand that. But you got to care. If you don't know who he is, that's fine. Some people, I mean, most people have no idea who Ralph A is. I understand that. But it's up to you. It's incumbent upon you as voters to look into who he was. Del Schaffner was a great receiver. We can't get Al Wistert in as a senior. Al Wistert, 9 years, 8 years, all pro, all decade, two-time league champion. What's he missing? If you were a player today, and that's the resume you give me, 9 years as a pro, 8 times all pro, two-time league champion, Super Bowl champion, let's say, all decade, what's missing? 0. He's the first ballot guy. He can't get a sniff because he's forgotten.
Do you think that right now, because I would imagine that if I was part of those committees, the blue ribbon committees, sort of like putting forth the seniors, coaches, contributors, you put forth Ralph Hay, that didn't happen. Buddy Parker, which was a big one for our group, the one that Chris and I, we have our little X chat group that we sort of talk about that often. I would be frustrated.
That's why I said you had to disband it. That's why I said that. So I think there are people disbanded, and I may be a voice crying in the wilderness. I don't think so, because I've talked to enough people who admittedly are older. What that means, I don't know how you define that, but who are frustrated too, and frustrated to the point where they're not sure where we're going here. And I don't think someone should be penalized. I'm talking about candidates just because they played in a different era, or because they are old, or because you don't know who they are. You kind of look at where they stood in their era against their peers. And to me, I look at some of those candidates and I think, what are we missing here? Maxie Baughn, what are we missing? Eddie Metter, why is he not getting any traction? I don't understand. And those are just sort of, those are a couple, but if you go into that senior pool, Rick Goslin is a good friend of mine. He tabulates the number of all decade, all pros and that sort of thing. And tells me that there are, I think, somewhere like 50, some 58, something all decade players who are not in Canton. And of that group, over 50, and I think the number 53 stands in my head, have never been discussed. They were the best of that decade, and they've never been discussed. Why? In most cases, they've been forgotten. I mean, you started the Hall in what, 1963? You forgot, 40 years before. And so you're trying to catch up. You never really caught up. I thought the Centennial class would do that. It didn't. I mean, who are the coaches we elected? 2 modern era coaches. I'm not trying to denigrate them. But we had elected 2 modern era coaches. We have some modern era players who are in the Centennial class who went, whoa, what's going on here? I'm not really sure. I thought we were supposed to clean up, the Lavi Dilwegs and the Al Wisterts, and they did to a certain point, but not, I think, to the satisfaction of some voters. I'm just saying that. And again, I'm speaking as one guy. I'm not speaking for that group. I'm speaking of one person.
Do you think with the coach contributor categories, would it benefit everybody if that was more like a direct selection from the blue ribbon committee?
Yes.
And then maybe stagger it that, it's not every year, it's every couple of years, just so you don't kind of have
Yeah, I think it should not be every year. I've got my ideas as to why those categories why those categories were created in the first place, but I'm not going to share them here. But I do think, yes, 1 every 2 years, 1 every 3. I think because when you're looking at a coach group that has 9 candidates, they all have 9, but the original field was 14. I mean, how discriminating are we being here? And I will tell you, I couldn't go very deep into that, but a guy who doesn't get any traction is a coach I covered, George Seifert, and you want to tell me why George Seifert doesn't get in? People go, yeah, because he had Bill Walsh's players. Well, and look what happened in Carolina. Okay, 2 things. One is, look what happened with Tom Flores when he went to Seattle. Same thing. he had Bill Walsh's players in 89. What about 94? And I did a comparison. He actually had, of his starters, a sort of dramatically different lineup than Bill Walsh ever fielded, plus including the quarterback was different. Now, he had played with Bill, and Bill got him. That's Steve Young. Joe Montana was gone. Why he'll? I mean, I honestly don't think he'll ever get in. But we've got guys like, I mean, we've got some people, and I don't understand why we have to have a coach committee every year, a coach category every year. I don't understand why we have a contributor category every year. And as I said to you, I'm at this point now, and saying that unless the rules change, just get rid of it. Get rid of it. These guys aren't getting in, all right? They're not getting in. And so you don't like calling people and telling them not getting in. All these guys aren't getting in, all right? They're not getting in. So just get rid of it. And that's a drastic response, and it's certainly maybe an overreaction, but I think it's closer to the reality. I really do. I mean, as I said, if you couldn't get, let's say, a commissioner, Paul Tagliabue couldn't get in. He couldn't get in until they created the Centennial class and put him in as a contributor. Because that group did do that. When they proposed those candidates, they didn't subject it to the Board of Selectors for approval. They just pushed them through, and so they got George Young, Steve Sable, and Paul Tagliabue into the Centennial class. But I've said that before. I think baseball does. They have a seniors committee, and that committee endorses candidates, and they automatically are enshrined, correct?
No. What they do is they have their own subcommittee. So
that's what I mean.
Oh yeah, but they still have to. They're still subject to a vote. With just
a vote of the entire field of voters.
No, just the subcommittee. So they have.
That's what I mean.
5%. Okay, sorry. Yeah, but yeah.
Okay, so the seniors subcommittee, the coaches subcommittee, the contributors subcommittee. They're 9 people, and those 9 people endorse a finalist, but they are then subjected to the entire group of 49. I suggested one time you ought to mandate that whoever is endorsed by those committees is elected. And they said, no, we want to, and I understand, listen, I understand that, but the people on the board of selectors don't understand how deep the seniors committee goes in vetting those people and how rigorous it is. It's the worst job by far. They have to go through, as I said, like 150 candidates to get 3. And it's so tough. And the 3 they get almost always are people you go, absolutely. Why did Jerry Crane have to wait 45 years? Why did Johnny Robinson have to wait 44 years? And they're people who should be in. They should have been. Why did Ray Guy have to wait? I mean, I remember when Ray Guy was elected, when I first got on here, I said to my wife, the only thing I'll say is if Ray Guy's elected, that's good enough for me. All right, that's just good for me because I want to see Ray Guy. And I remember I participated in a conversation, this is years ago when he got elected actually, and there was some pushback to him. And I said, all I know about Ray Guy is the best collegiate punter in the world, in this United States or at least, is given the Ray Guy Award. So it's named after Ray Guy, the best punter in the country, named after Ray Guy. Must be a reason. And another voter said, hey, that's great, except the best offensive lineman gets the Dave Remington Award. And he's not in the Hall of Fame. And I said, yeah, one difference. Dave Remington's not on the 75th anniversary team. Ray Guy is. And well, but at that time, it wasn't 100 at that time. And so we got in, but I wasn't the only one. There were other people. Ron Borges did a great job presenting him. But there's some blind spots, and I have mine too. Listen, I'm not the voice of authority here. I'm just giving you my opinion. But there's some blind spots that can't be overcome. And when you understand that, it is frustrating, but you try to work within the process. I'm not real good at that. I get very frustrated, but there's some who are better than others, and they're successful. But this one I had this year was it was so frustrating because I thought it was really maybe the best candidate I've ever had to endorse. And I thought I knew the odds were long and I knew what I was up against, but I thought we had a chance just because I would say to you guys, tell me, you talked about Halls of Fame, right? Earlier.
Yeah.
Tell me what major sports Hall of Fame in this country or in Canada, I guess, doesn't have its founder in.
There
I
isn't.
can't think. There isn't. Yeah, there is. There's one in Canton.
Oh, okay.
And every year, I don't want to get into this, but there isn't one, and that's disturbing to me. I spoke with a family. They were so enthusiastic and so hopeful, like any of the others. I mean, all the 20 candidates, and you go, we spent 8 hours in that room to elect 4 of 20 candidates. We had what, 20% of the field was elected? What are we doing? And that's why I think the whole, at some point, I'm guessing, I'm not telling you, I haven't spoken to anyone. I'm just telling you from my vantage point when I stand back and look at this. If and when they look at this, they go, ooh, maybe this isn't what we wanted. Maybe we're going to have to make a change. I don't think that'll happen this year. I really don't, because then you go, people on the outside rightly would say, what's this group doing? Each year they keep changing. They have no idea what they're doing. I think you have to stay with it for some period of time. How long, I don't know, but you might want to tweak it a little bit until you make another major change. But I don't know when that's going to happen.
One thing I definitely want to ask you, though, and Chris and I were talking about that yesterday. I believe that it was announced before that you were actually going to be in the room together. And then
that changed because
well, I was going to say, how do you as a presenter, because you presented Ralph A,
yeah,
do you think things could have been differently if you were all together?
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, certainly I think it's a much easier conversation when you're all in the same room together. They wanted to do that last year and the weather got in the way. All of a sudden there was a major snowstorm. We were going to Atlanta and we couldn't get there. So they said, forget it. This year, they said there are too many people who are still involved with the playoffs, and that's one of the problems here when you're doing this. They're still involved with the playoffs, so they're more interested in, and they should be, covering their teams on a Tuesday call than they are in trying to vote in here. And so they said, I'll go into another site. They said, listen, we'll do this virtually again. And it works kind of like this. I mean, so I present here, and then we go, okay, Kirk, you want to make your you've got a question, anyone else have let's go and throw it open. Who's got questions? And that's what happens. You make a 5-minute presentation, some went a little bit over, wasn't anything egregious, some went a little bit under. And so you then throw it open to debate. And if there is none, you realize if you're a presenter, you're probably dead, unless you have a first ballot guy. Mm-hmm. You're probably dead because it's telling you that nobody is really interested in talking about your candidate. That was not frequent, and that wasn't something I thought. I don't recall anyone really having no discussion. I think there's some little discussion, but then there obviously was the Eli discussion, and I just wrote about him today. That was a big one. That was 52 minutes. That was a big one, and for the right reasons. And then there's a polarized room, and I think everyone understood that going in, including the presenters. They made a great case for him, but there was pushback, and it'll be, I think, if I look at what we're talking about here for the next 3 years, Breeze, Roethlisberger the next year, Brady the next year. How is Eli Manning going to crack that if there are 3 guys? And the answer is he's not. He didn't make the first cut. Okay, so he's going to have to wait some time if he gets in, and that board's going to have to change, and the board will. The board will change. I mean, he's got 19 years of eligibility left. I'll be gone. There'll be a lot of other guys gone. The board will change.
Yeah, with Eli too, is in addition to the 3 that you mentioned, you also have some contemporary candidates that he compares well to, with like Philip Rivers and Matt Ryan, that are going to kind of take up some of the conversation as well. So that's going to be a real interesting next few years here when you discuss the quarterback candidates out there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I'm a big Philip Rivers fan, however, not as a Hall of Famer. I covered him. I love dealing with this guy. I loved watching him play. But to me, Eli separates himself from both those guys. Not only is he a 2-time Super Bowl winner, he's a 2-time Super Bowl MVP. And I do believe he had Hall of Fame moments in his career. I don't know that you can say that about Matt Ryan and Philip Rivers. I mean, moments where you go, whoa, do you remember that? I mean, with Eli Manning, it wasn't just the Super Bowls I remember. I thought the best game I remember him playing was the 2011 conference championship game against San Francisco out in Candlestick. Or no, it wasn't Candlestick. I don't think that. Oh, maybe it was. I don't know. But I used to cover before when I was in Candlestick. But anyway, it was out there, and he got the ever living crap beaten out of him in that game. And he picked himself up, kept throwing. Picked himself up and kept throwing. There was one other game where I saw a quarterback doing that. And that's not to, I did actually two others. Brett Favre was the other one, that New Orleans game that led to Bountygate. But I remember watching that game and saying to somebody, something's going on here because they're hitting him well after the play. They're trying to
Saints fan, I'm okay with it. But anyway,
get him out of the game. And at the other one was Troy Aikman in 1994 championship game. I was covering the 49ers my first year on the beat there. I'd come up from San Diego. And Troy Aikman got the ever-living hell beaten out of him that game. They went after him. And it was that time of year, a Candlestick, it's always wet. Oh, and it was wet and muddy. He picked himself up and threw and picked himself up and threw. And then boom, boom, boom. It's very different than today. Because today, if you breathe on a quarterback, you get a flag. But then he got hit from here to Burlingame. And he kept playing. And I came out of that game winning, saying, you know, Troy Aikman, I didn't think of him as a remarkable quarterback. I thought him as a really good one. I've seldom seen someone who is so resilient, and he kept them in when it looked like they wouldn't be. I think they ended up losing, I think, by 10 points or something, but he kept throwing and throwing and throwing. And I can't imagine what his body looked like the next day. I can't. It's just a different era now. And that's the thing that's tough. When you're talking to people today about quarterback play, wide receiver play, I always say to them, I'm not denigrating the player, just saying it's never been easier to play quarterback because the rules are just as such that you run, you slide. If anyone, hits you, you saw what happened with Patrick Mahomes. They threw a flag and he wasn't hit. And if you touch them around the head or the shoulders, the neck area, it's penalized. I would ask them to run a film of any Joe Namath game against the Oakland Raiders. And they killed him. I mean, they just killed him. And that was because Al Davis said, you want to kill the monster? Go at its head. And they went at him. And the beating those guys took. And yeah, the NFL had to do something because you're not paying to go in and see the left tackle play. You're not paying to go in and see the backup tight end. You're paying to see the quarterback. And I think when Brady got hit in 2007, it was a Kansas City game. And if you remember, he got hit low. And he tore his knee. It was the season opener. Not 2007, I'm sorry, 2008. And he was lost for the season. I think they realized we've got to start protecting these guys because people aren't going out there to see Matt Castle. They're going out there to see Tom Brady. And he's a great quarterback. We got to keep the great quarterbacks, all quarterbacks on the field. So I know it's an incredibly difficult position to play. I understand that. But it's never been easier in terms of penalties because you remember what receivers were up against before. You cross the middle of the field, God help you. I mean, Jack Tatum's waiting there, Jack Lambert. I mean, God help you. They'll take your head off. And I think about I think it was the first possession in the 2013 Super Bowl, Denver and Seattle. Demaryius Thomas came across the middle and Cam Chancellor just leveled him. That's not going to happen. That's not in today's rules. That's not going to happen. And so you went across the middle at your own risk. And obviously we know what happened to Darryl Stingley. That's why they changed the rules. And rightly so. I mean, it's a dangerous game anyway. I'm going to tell you guys, if you're ever on a sideline and you watch the game, and I spent most of my career on sidelines because we could go down there at some point at the end of the game. The hits these guys take, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's like two semis hitting head on. It's unbelievable the punishment they take. And that's why they have done what they've done with the kickoff. And I don't mind that. I really don't mind that. A lot of people do. But I think you've got to do something to try to make a violent game less violent, if that's possible. And unfortunately, the commissioner says that, but then he talks about, let's go to an 18-game schedule. Let's keep Thursday night games. What are we talking about here? 17 games is crazy. You saw at the end of the year how many guys were on IR. The Lions had 21 guys. I
Mhm.
mean, the punishment these guys take, yeah, it's more money for everyone, especially the owners. But you look at what that does in the Thursday night games to play within 4 days of playing another game. It's brutal. I mean, it's brutal. And I remember because I know that there was somebody in the league office years ago. This is years ago. Who talked to me about doing something on with Thursday games. It was what the Pac-12 was doing. Might have been Pac-10 at that time, but it's no longer the Pac anything. But it was they had done it so that you could have a week off. I think it was a week. You play your game, and then you play the following Thursday, and you'd have time off, and you worked it around buys. And I thought it's a great idea. It worked. It worked the whole thing out. It was great. And I remember they opened one season out in San Diego, Thursday night game. Well, I used to cover the Chargers. Got a lot of friends out there, and I love going to San Diego. And so I was there, and I remember there was a Roger Goodell was there for a press conference, and if you cover the league for a long period of time, which I had, you know everyone in the NFL office because you're talking to them at one time or another. And so Roger Goodell was there, and then I said, "Oh, I got a question for you. You know, if we're talking about player safety, why are we talking about Thursday night games? Why are we even doing Thursday night games? I've got a schedule here that's the Pac-12 schedule," and they cut me off right then. Said, "We don't listen. This we're talking about this game. We're not talking about Thursday nights." Yeah, but this no, let's move on. And they didn't want to hear it. So I've said this before. I think player safety should be a priority. I do, but it's a violent game. What do people love about it? It's a violent game. So I understand that. But you've lessened the chances for player safety by putting Thursday night games in 17 game seasons and now an 18 game season. What are you, crazy? And I think they're going to sell players on the fact that you can make more money. That's great, but look what's happening to these guys. And I've got a real modicum of sympathy, not a modicum. I've got actually a lot of sympathy for the players. I have a modicum of sympathy for the owners because they're going, well, sure, we can make more money. That's great. But why would you do it? I mean, there's got to be how much do you need to be happy? I mean, at some point, don't we need to think about what we're doing here? Why don't you just play a 52 game schedule? I mean, wouldn't that make you happy? Look all the money you can make. So at some point, it's got to stop. And I listened to the commissioner, and he seems to think this is a great idea. I don't understand why, if you're talking about player safety, and that's a priority. Apparently, it's not a priority.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on the international games with the extended travel and having to fly over and come back, play a week later? Do you see
I
that as being something?
understand. I understand it from the owner's standpoint. They're trying to create new markets. They're trying to create markets for more sales, more revenue. I understand that. It's a business. That's what they say. It's business. Okay, I understand that. At the same time, I don't like what it's done to the people here. You're a fan of the New York Giants, let's say. You just lost a home game to London. And they're saying you were growing the sport. Okay, you're growing a sport, but and I understand other leagues are doing the same thing. Do you actually think you're putting a team over in Wembley Stadium? You think you're putting a team in
Shad
Berlin?
Khan thinks that.
Sorry?
I think Shad Khan of the Jaguars thinks that.
Yeah, I know that. But I think until and unless you create a separate division over there, which maybe that's a long-term goal, it's not feasible. But my bigger concern is for home fans. I think fans here in the U.S. I mean, I think what they're saying is we're trying to grow the sport at your expense, actually. Yeah, you're going to pay for season tickets and a lot of money for season tickets. However, we're farming one of those games out there. You still have 8 like you did in the past, but we're farming one of those games out. I'm not a fan.
Okay, well, Clark, thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to do this for us. And again, thank you again for all the curtain opening that you do. It means a lot to, I think, a lot more people than you realize.
Oh, well, no, I appreciate that. I try, but I appreciate that. I think it's a process few understand. And I think they like it that way because there's a mystique about that. And I understand that. But if I was really open, we'd have to have like 8 hours of this conversation. So,
and whenever you want to do that, we're here.
Yeah.
We would love that. For sure. But it does mean a lot to myself. I know I can speak for Chris, and I know I can speak for a lot of people who I've gotten to know. In some cases, I've got to meet them just going to the Pro Football Hall of Fame,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
which I may or may not do. I don't know. There's only my crew is not as interested with only 4 entrants.
Yeah, I think that's one of the downsides of it, because I heard somebody else say that, and I think that's one of the downsides. Certainly, Packers fans are. Sterling Sharp is in there, and others as well. Eric Allen. I mean, Raiders fans and Eagle fans. But I think at some point, there'll be a change at some point, because I know enough about this where I do believe Jim Porter is determined to get this straight, whether it takes 1 year, 10 years, 20 years. He's determined to get it rectified. I think they need to look at it. That doesn't mean they're going to change it. I think they need to look at it and just say, what do we have here? What are the concerns of voters? Where are we going with this? How can we make it better? Can we make it better? Is this what we want? Is this what we want? And I would say, without taking a poll, I'd say most of the selectors would say, no, it's not. Now, what the solution is, that's why we should have an open conversation.
But they are malleable. So, I mean, it is something that, again, and maybe it's the Canadian in me, just being an ultimate optimist. I don't know. I do feel that eventually we're going to see a course correct. I just don't know when.
No, I agree. I feel the same way. But if you had to present a candidate, and do as much research as some of us had, and then you find him shot down because someone goes, I've never heard of Maxie Baughn. I never heard that. How deflating that is and discouraging. And as I said, when someone went public with that, and actually I saw another one that really got under my skin, and it was on a secondary third thread or whatever. I saw it in some obscure site, and voter said, might have been the same voter, who the F is Ralph A? I went, it's up to you to find out. It's up to you to find out. Right. So if that's the attitude, I don't know what we're doing here. So
here or there. Well, wherever you are, wherever you may be, make today count. And thank you for all your support here at NotInHallOfFame.com. Take care.
Yeah, that was a pleasure. Thanks, guys. Take care. See you.
So much.
Bye.